Do you have a book or some quotes or anything like that when you do feel like you're stuck that you would share with us?
Well, for me, I mean, I have two that I keep coming back to. One is do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for today is its own trouble. And that obviously comes Matthew 6:34 from the Bible, and it's one of those things that has always been powerful for me. And I think the other one was the quote that came to me from my late mother-in-law, who said, who I think my wife and I were both kind of complaining over Thanksgiving dinner about kind of where we were living and how our life was going. And she just looked at us and she said, you just need to bloom where you're planted.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
And so I think that's great advice. Bloom where you're planted. The flowers don't have a choice of where you plant them. So bloom or die, right? So
Right, right.
that's their choice. And I probably think about that quote a couple times a
Yeah.
day these days. And I really, really, it's hard to follow that advice of not worrying about things today. But if you spend all of your time worrying about how things are and how things are going to happen, I was reading a blog by now I'm not going to be able to remember who it was. It may have been Casey or one of the people writing the blogs. I'm not going to remember who it is. But they said that the beginning of the pandemic, they spent a fair amount of time every day kind of looking at the totals, right? Every day we get up and say how many cases of COVID, how many deaths, what states, where's your state, how are we comparing? And I think it took the wind out of a lot of people's sails because we just all kind of shut down and
Mhm.
started watching this, and then at some point you have to decide, well, I can't just lay here and wait on something to happen. I have to make something happen. And then obviously as a teacher, if you lay down, your students are going to lay down.
Mhm.
And so at some point you kind of have to pull yourself up and say, all right, we're gonna think up something cool to do. Let's do this video project together. We all gonna record a part of it.
Right.
And that was a powerful turning point for us. So I think we can get into this thing where all we do is we worry about the troubles of today, and
Mhm.
it's like those troubles are going to take care of themselves. Don't worry
Right.
about it. They're sufficient for today. Tomorrow's another day. So I think that's, for me, that's pretty powerful.
Greetings, I'm Mark Riley, and welcome to the Washington Tattoo Podcast, where the world's musical traditions come to life. The Washington Tattoo is an international music and arts festival coming to the Washington, D.C. metro area. Our podcast explores the lives and stories of world-renowned musicians, dancers, producers, choreographers, artists, educators, arts advocates, and those who serve our cultural communities at large. For more information and donations, find us at www.thewashingtontattoo.com. Now, please enjoy this episode of the Washington Tattoo Podcast, sharing the power of the arts, one story at a time.
All right, greetings everyone. I have Dr. Daniel Moore on the line here, who is a composer, arranger, clinician, and educator. He is the Director of Percussion Studies at the University of Iowa. He is also the Program Director for the Birch Creek Music Performance Center Percussion and Steel Band Program. He's a Yamaha International Performing Artist, a Innovative Percussion Signature Series artist, a Sabian artist, as well as a whole slew of other artists as well. But he's highly published and highly sought after educator and performer. So Dan, thank you so much for taking the afternoon to talk with us.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So I'm really into inspiration and kind of why people think the way they think and kind of why they get that initial like latched on to music. And people are inspired by different things and people latch on to that inspiration. So for you, what would you say, or who would you say is your first big inspiration and why?
Well, my first, maybe just inspiration in music or in life was my junior high band director. Mr. Jimmy Yancey was, uh, became more or less this father figure for me. Not growing up with a father in the home was a challenge, and it was kind of hard to keep me wrangled in, and I ran amok all the way until the seventh grade. So meeting Mr. Yancey and being inspired to be a great person, was an important part of that. I was just thinking about one of the first deaths from the COVID-19 in Texas, which is where I'm from, was a high school band director,
Mm,
and and it's that sort of hit pretty
right.
close to home for me. I mean, it's like in Texas where I'm from, and a high school band director who is involved with high school students, and uh, so inspirational to them. But what was really interesting was reading the memorials and the tributes to this high school band director um, in Southeast Texas, which is near where I was from. Um, and these students counted him as a father figure, and it was like ding, ding, ding. It just really rang a bell with me as a surrogate father or a second father, or the reason that they got through high school, or the
Right.
reason that they wanted to pursue music or were even good people in their lives was because of this high school band director. And I was just really uh, kind of inspired by that, and it made me think again. And I think of Mr. Yancey often, who was uh, a middle school band director his entire life. Uh, was in the Heartland of America band in the Air Force,
Okay.
and that was inspirational to me. Um, and was actually in the Heartland of America band with one of my other mentors, a guy by the name of Dick Shorey. And I know you mentioned that you might want to talk about Dick a little bit. But my middle school band director and Dick Shorey were in the Heartland of America band together.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
It's amazing how those stories are connecting. I mean, I always think about this too. I mean, kids have, a lot of things being thrown at them their entire life. And sometimes, the band classroom is one of the most inspiring places they have. Maybe they don't have the greatest home life, or they're having a hard time socially in school, but I mean, music is that great outlet where those kids may have the chance to really express themselves.
absolutely.
Yeah, I find that incredible. And so, I mean, I always kind of think of this as well. I mean, I think about instructors and I think about teachers and folks who, inspire others. And so for me, I always kind of think about being inspired is one thing, but then there's always kind of these memories that we have. And could you share possibly one of your greatest music memories?
Well, again, I'm not wanting to dwell on the eighth grade, but it really kind of goes back to eighth grade. People ask me at what moment in my life that I realized that I wanted to do music the rest of my life. It was at an eighth grade football pep rally.
Hmm.
And of course, we all know the environment of a pep rally, and the band is there, and the cheerleaders are there, and there's all this excitement, and the whole school is there. And then there's a moment where the band gets to play a number, and everybody kind of enjoys that number, or maybe the cheerleaders dance, or the dance team does something, or it's just
Right.
all eyes are on the band and the dance team or the cheerleaders or whatever, and that's our moment, right? That's our moment to shine. And on the day of the big pep rally, I was sick.
Oh no.
I was sick. I would just, and at that young age, I'd never really experienced flu or being, that real, we all wake up in the morning the day of the test and we feel sick, right? And we don't want to go to the test, and that's not a real sick, but it's in our minds as a sick. This was the first time I was really, really sick, and I just didn't, feel good at all. My head was, just woozy, and I just felt awful. And it was like, "God, I have to go play drum set at this pep rally today, and it's a big deal, and it's important, for the kids in the school, and everybody looks at me and watches me while I play the horse, you
Hmm.
know, in 1971, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so I drag my drums over, and I would drag, and I just kind of sit like a lump. And it comes time to play the pep rally, and as soon as the pep rally started, and as soon as I started playing, I completely forgot about how I felt. I was completely transported, and it was the first time that I really realized the power of music to make you forget
Mm.
and to suspend time and to take you away from even physical pain in some ways,
Right.
emotional pain certainly, uh, lots of other kind of issues that you may have in your life if you have a bad home life or kids are bullying you at school. Doesn't matter. Music can take you completely away from that. So that was a super powerful moment for me as a young kid, and I think from that day forward, it was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this music thing.
I love it. I mean, that right there speaks to the transformative power. I mean, there's so much research that's been done on how music affects the mind and the emotions and the spirit of people. I mean, that's the proof in the pudding right there.
Absolutely.
And that to me is inspiring to hear that from you. That's great. All right, so I really love a lot of your story, and we're going to dig into a little bit here. But you've done a lot of research, you've done a lot of performing, you've done a lot of arranging. Your background in percussion and jazz and classical music. I mean, you're definitely a craftsman of all the percussion crafts. So one of the things for me to kind of link it to the last question is I remember watching Dave Samuels and Andy Norrell separately, but on different occasions, and that was really for me one of probably up there with my top five, musical memories for me is seeing those folks and that level of excellence performed. And I know that you worked with Dave and Andy. Can you talk about a little bit of your relationship with them?
Well, I actually wrote quite a long blog about Dave right after he passed away, and sort of remembering our relationship together. And I think one of the most important things that I remember about Dave, and if you want to look the blog up, it's pretty easy to find. It's on Facebook, and it's kind of out there. Um, and the kind of the title of the blog is Dear Dave Samuels, thank you for never telling me good job.
That's incredible.
I studied with Dave off and on, formally, informally, for about 10 or 11 years, which is longer than I spent with any one of my college professors.
Mm.
You're with your undergrad person for 4 years. You're with a grad person for 2 years. You're with
Right.
another person for 2 or 4 years. Um, and I studied with Dave for longer than I studied with any single person.
Wow.
And in all that time, he never said, "That's great. That's really good. You're really
Mhm.
doing good." And it while on the one hand it was extremely frustrating at the time and extremely sort of demoralizing, in a way. It's like, is there something good about what I'm doing here at all? And I can still remember the sting of one day just getting really frustrated with Dave and saying, so what do you think? Am I going to make it?
Mm.
Am I going to make it in this business?
Right.
And he snapped at me. I mean, he literally snapped at me. He said, "I can't tell you that. Nobody can tell you that." And that's where it stopped. And he could have gone on to say, "But nobody can tell you that you can't."
Mhm.
But he didn't go that far. He
Right.
only went as far as just saying, "I can't tell you that. No one can tell you that," and I'll never forget that. So if you were looking for that sort of validation, that sort of face value validation, you weren't going to get that from Dave.
Mm.
Um, but it would come in other ways where he might confide something in you. He might say you might be at a concert or a clinic somewhere, and he might lean over and say, "This person is not telling me anything."
Mm.
that see, taking you into his compliments was a way of saying you have landed, you have
Mm,
arrived, you know.
right.
So it just always made me more hungry uh, for things, and it also sort of set me on a path, a somewhat disappointing path, of always comparing myself to musicians who were always greater than me.
Mm,
So I
right.
never compared myself to the guy in the band sitting next to me. I never compared myself to people my age. I always compared myself to Dave, who was 10 years
Mm,
older than me. I always compared myself to Mike Minieri, who was
right.
20 years older than me. Um, I always compared myself to those people. And of course, you're going to pale in comparison. You're going to fail to rise up to that standard. But I discovered that if you compare yourself to the people on your level, you're never going to get any
Right.
higher. And so by that constant disappointment of never being good enough compared to Dave Samuels, that picked me up and brought me up.
I love that. I mean, that's a big discussion we have with a lot of our folks on our team is this the idea of leveling up. Like, who are you surrounding yourself with that forces you to level up? Because that, you can be okay with maybe, all right, the idea of I've made it, so you kind of plateau, or are you going to try to stay relevant until the day you die? Because we're artists, we're creators, and we want to keep progressing.
Right?
No, that's incredible. And so you'd also done some work with Andy Norrell, I believe, too, right?
Yep. Yep. We just recently had Andy in at the University of Iowa, and he produced and performed on our newest CD with the Iowa Steel Band.
Wow.
It's called Jungle Music, the
Hmm.
music of Andy Norrell, and it's a CD that's available on CD Baby, and I think you can get it several different places, iTunes maybe, and so if you look for that, so we've had Andy here to working with us, and he's another one who is not free and easy with the compliments. Uh, you have to bring your own confidence, right? When you come into to work with Andy. Um,
Yeah, and that's one of the things to me, I mean, just teaching styles and how you communicate with students and being able to read like, all right, do I need to push you? Do I need to figure out to pick you up? And I love learning from the masters that have a very different style than I do because then I can watch how people interact and I mean, it's a form of motivation when there's almost this challenge of, no, you're not going to get a compliment from me. You've got to earn the compliment from me. And I mean, it's another tool in the toolbox for an educator.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's just so. I, I see it with my students. I do try to dispense equally with compliments and, and criticisms. I do more than what my teachers had done. But I also feel like that being honest with students is maybe more important than being careful of their feelings.
Right.
And it's just in this day and age, it's just so hard to get us to find students who are willing to say, "Tell me what you think," and mean it.
Right.
I think we
Right.
all kind of want to hear something nice, but if I found that the people who are most willing to say to me, that's not the best I've ever seen you play.
Hmm.
I got my doctorate at the University of Kentucky with Professor Jim Campbell. And Jim is the first one to say, I've heard you play better. I've heard
Yeah.
you do better than that.
Hmm.
And it's like we're always like, hey, what did you think? Well, I thought this could be better. Like, wow, what a letdown. But okay, you're right, and I need to go and work on it. So sometimes that honesty is hard for, I think, especially today's younger students to deal with sometimes. And so I
Right.
work really overtime with my students to let them know that any of the criticism that comes across is based in love, and it's based in my desire for you to do better. And it
Mm.
may come off as sounding harsh or brusque because
Mhm.
maybe I don't always have time
Right.
to say the nice thing or to give the nice compliment. Um, I do try to start every criticism with something good,
Mhm.
which is a little different than what I was brought up with.
Well, and I love that too because the tactic then causes the student to self-analyze. And as a performer and as potentially a teacher, that analyzation of performance is what's going to allow you to grow. And I think, I remember my first few like massive failures as a musician, and those were so in the moment they hurt so badly, but later on down the road, I became so grateful for that knockdown or that letdown because it gave me fuel to want to be better. The self-analyzing of my ability and my ability to grow really came into question because I was a lucky kid. I was pretty talented. I had been able to win some contests, and at one point, you're not going to be the best. And that was a really interesting conversation I've had with a couple colleagues about, how do you let your students know that it's okay when someone's better than you? Because there's always going to be someone that's better than you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So to go into the idea of, Dave and a little bit of Andy and then into your work, I mean, you've really brought a lot of different ideas to your compositions and your teaching styles and everything. And I always love to talk about the hybridization of techniques or traditions and technology. So really, I mean, how did you start kind of experimenting with the ideas of taking something that's old and bringing it kind of to the modern age?
Uh, I think I've always done that, just sort of naturally. It was just sort of an innate thing to me. Um, I think it had to do with ownership. I think it had to do with putting your stamp
Mm,
on something. And I think it was, I talk to my college students about this, especially doctoral students, all the time. I feel like that when you're coming up as a musician, we're copycats, and you do have to copy the masters. You have to master the music that came before. You have to master the repertoire. You have to have at least dipped your toe into repertoire.
mhm.
But then at some point, when you cross that seemingly huge um, chasm between being a student and being a professional musician, how do you fill that chasm? How do you make that leap? How do you get across there?
Right.
Well, it's going to come from you creating something that wasn't there before. It
Yeah.
just naturally has to. Um, and I tell my students all the time, there are people who've gone out and who have copied verbatim Lee Howard Stevens or copied verbatim Gary Burton
Mm.
and tried to emulate and everything that they studied with those people and they learned the same repertoire, and then they go out and wonder why nobody wants to hire them to come and play a concert there. And then you start to realize, well, Gary Burton was here last year. Why do we want a copy of Gary Burton this year?
Right.
And so what's the reason for inviting you? You're not bringing anything new to the table. So it eventually, either by accident or by design, dawns on people that you got to come up with something new. And I say this to my students all the time. The only reason that you know the name Dan Moore right now is because I didn't try to play the music of other people.
Mm.
I immediately started to figure out ways to make music my own, to develop my own techniques, to play the marimba, but in an improvisational approach, to play it like a band rather than like a soloist. And it was just one of those things that just sort of happened.
Mm.
Working with the Britton Moore duo with Matt Britton, the steel pan artist from Nashville, Tennessee. Um, we started this duo thing 37 years ago,
Mm.
and we were the first steel pan marimba duo. And so, who do you look to if you're the first, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
We had Matt and I had actually seen Dave and Andy play a steel pan marimba duet. The first time they ever played together was at PASIC in Knoxville. I think it was 1984. And Matt and I were in the steel band that was backing up Andy and
Wow.
Dave, and they played this duet. And we looked at each other and went, this could be good. And
Yeah.
since we were both studying with those guys and both inspired by them, we went to them and said, "Hey, are you guys going to do this duo thing? Or are you guys going to keep doing this steel pan marimba duo?" And they're like, "No, it's just like a one-time thing we just did for PASIC. You know, it was just a thing, right?" And we were like, "So would it be cool?" And we were asking permission. You know, I thought that was,
Yeah.
you know, it was like, like a Andy Griffith episode or something. It's like we were asking permission to run away. So, so we said, "Could we do a duo thing?" And they were like, "Yeah, go for it. We're never going to do this again."
That's
And
awesome.
of course, a few years later, the Caribbean Jazz Project came out, you know, and them together, right? They were never going to do anything together ever again, right? So we just started doing that, and I had to develop techniques, marimba techniques, to use in a marimba steel pan duo.
Hmm.
That's how I had to create my own thing, right?
Right.
And I think the best compliment I ever got was sending our first recording with the duo to our teacher in Wichita, J.C. Combs, who was also very inspirational to us. But Dr. Combs, we sent him a copy of our CD, and he wrote me back and he said, "I think the best thing that I can say about this is that if you sent me this CD and didn't tell me who was on it, I would know it was you."
Wow.
And that's when it's really started to dawn on me that the voice is important, you know, and having a voice. Now, if you play the trumpet, and you know, you can tell the difference between Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis. You can hear that difference in their sound because they play differently, right? Wynton Marsalis has a whole different sound than any of these other people,
Right.
or Lester Bowie, or whoever it is. They all have a different sound, but that's because it comes through that horn. How do you have your own voice on piano? How can you tell the difference between Thelonious Monk and Mulgrew Miller, or
Right.
you know, it's a piano. How do you tell the difference between a vibes player? It's
Right.
just metal vibes, right? But you can, and you can tell by the choices that they make, the sound that they get on the instrument, and all of that is crucially important to creating your own voice and creating your own sound. So for me, it was just a natural thing to bring in all of the music that I'm as interested in, all of the things that I wanted to hear out of music, and try to put it on the marimba or the vibes.
Well, and I love that too, because that speaks to allowing yourself to be as open as possible to hearing new things, hearing different styles of things, because I mean, at the end of the day, none of us really know what's going to stick. You know, if you only expose yourself to five things, that means there's only the potential of five things to stick. If you expose yourself to a million things, maybe then you have a couple hundred or 1,000 things stick, and then you have all of those options that you can choose from. Where if you keep yourself closed, you're saying, "Well, I do this thing," and I had a great conversation with Joshua Simons from PAS, and we were talking about him going in a career of arts management versus performing. And he said, at some point, I really enjoyed watching the detail of setting up the concert and organizing the behind the scenes and then taking in the performance that I helped put together versus being the one receiving the applause. And I thought that was pretty profound because so many of us start, we're like, I want to be the big drum set rock, guy. I want to be the marimba soloist. I want to be the next Evelyn Glennie or something like that. And I mean, those are great aspirations. But I think again, when you start getting all those experiences, and you do start recognizing that, dreams, you have to keep hope. You have to keep dreaming. Totally get it. But when you start hitting reality, where your skill set and your talent level starts figuring out, where are you plateauing? Versus, am I only going to explore that one thing, or am I going to say, I've reached to this level of excellence here, and I may not get any better, even if I double down or triple down, but maybe there's a new door I am able to open kind of to the right of this option or to the left of this option. And I love hearing your story about that, of just, bringing in as much as you can, and all of a sudden it kind of starts naturally figuring itself out because you enjoyed so many different styles of music.
Well, Joshua has certainly brought that expertise to PAS. That's one thing for sure, and we're lucky that that he chose that path. That's for sure.
Mhm. Absolutely. So I love it. I'd love to bring up some of the story with Dick Shorey and kind of his legacy and how you worked with him. But I mean, he was really at the cutting edge of percussion in like the 1960s. So could you talk a little bit about your relationship with him, and then kind of what you feel he gave to the percussion community with his exploration?
Wow, it's like, how long is this? I don't know. I don't know if we have that kind of time. Shorey is a couple of books worth of stuff just in himself, man. I tell you, he was a mover and a shaker right from the beginning. Uh, a native Iowan, came through the military, uh, was in the Korean conflict. Um,
Mhm.
the he just was always a mover and a shaker. And when he came to Chicago to go to Northwestern and to be a part of the Chicago music scene, he joined the Ludwig Drum Company he became the first educational director for a major percussion company.
Mhm.
So much so that he didn't even know they didn't even know what an education director was. He just was, and he did everything from filling orders in the warehouse to making sure that Ringo's drum set was ready to go and
Wow.
on one day, and Buddy Rich's drum set ready to go the next day. Um, he came up with all of these incredible ideas. I mean, it's like if you think about the impact that the drum kit. I don't know if you've you probably when you were little. I don't know if you're old enough, but you would always get the drum kit, the Ludwig drum kit. It was called the UFO because it looked like it was kind of a rounded but square on the bottom case, and had a little shiny snare drum, a little stand, a little Gladstone pad, uh, and the Haskell hard drum book,
Mm.
inside it, and a pair of 2B drumsticks, right? So um, Shorey was the one that went out to the warehouse and pulled these items together and asked the crew in the out in the R&D area to build me a box for this stuff to go in, and let me have it. Let me see what I can do with it.
Mm.
Um, and the story goes that Ludwig Senior, who was still running the company at the time, just hated the idea. He just thought it was a terrible idea. Nobody's ever going to use these. They're going to be worthless, And so he made six. They made six of these UFO drum kits, and he took them to I think it was Frank's Drum Shop in Chicago, or it's one of the other retailers in Chicago, um, and said, see if you could find somebody interested in these. He called back a week later and ordered 50.
Wow.
Uh, and so from the rest is sort of history. It's like every major drum company has some sort of percussion bell kit or a pad and bell kit or a snare, But that's what Shorey started that, and
Wow.
so he was a mover and a shaker. So that was sort of the industry end. The other end of it was the stereo recording end. He was very early on. He was making stereo albums in 1958. Elvis Presley and Perry Como and Anne Margaret were selling millions of copies of mono recordings, meaning that the same sound comes out of both speakers. It wasn't stereo. So Shorey, Enoch Light, a number of these sort of movers and shakers and percussion started doing these percussion-based recordings in 1958 to use as demonstration recordings for the RCA stereos. And so there are just so many amazing stories about Shorey being a leader in the quadraphonic sound movement of the '80s. He's done just about everything in the music industry. It's incredible.
That's incredible. So I know a little bit about Mr. Story, and honestly, a lot of it was sparked by you in your first recording. And not only was it your first recording, it was the first recording I had heard of you, and I think we got it from you when we visited you in 2005.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And man, it was a game changer for me. Just the ideas that were there and how it was incorporating the sound files and how, when you and again, you have to make sure you have the proper equipment to listen to these recordings, you
Right,
know.
right.
And so I remember getting a pair of like nice, headphones, noise canceling headphones and listening to it. And I mean, it's a different experience.
Oh,
And
thank you.
that's really, I really, really enjoyed that album. And honestly, it's cool for me. I know that you had done your doctoral thesis, I think,
Mhm.
on Dick Shorey. And so putting that all together with your work today and the sound quality, and then also what you're teaching your students, that's powerful. And I want to say thank you for what you're contributing now with, your mentors and how you're putting that all together to build something new. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It means a lot.
So going down that route, you deal with a lot of students and you're constantly teaching. This is a very strange time right now. What some advice do you give to folks that are looking, to continue doing their career in music?
Well, I think the best advice I can give anybody who wants to do a career, not only in music but just in the arts in general, I think the best advice is to diversify, and that means to diversify skills, diversify ideas, diversify your interests, diversify your friends. I think the more you can know about other things, the more well-rounded you're going to be. I mean, you had mentioned earlier about the range of my interests.
Mm,
I would like for my interests to even be broader. I wish that when I was, 20 years old, that I was reading more and going to more art openings and reading more poetry. I wish I was doing those things instead of being in the practice room pounding on a drum set.
mm,
Um, uh, I think you still need to do those things too. You still need to dedicate yourself to get your 10,000 hours in of pounding the snare drum, right? Sure. But if you live in a vacuum, then you can't bring any of these other influences that you talked about
right.
into it. If you've never been to a, a, a play in a theater, if you've never if you've never watched people who are the masters of their art, even though it's not your art,
Right.
I think there's just so much value to watching somebody who's at the top of their game. Even watching an athlete, I think there's so many comparisons between athleticism and music making. I think there are all those sort of connections. It takes mental and physical discipline and strength and focus and all of these kind of things that it takes to throw a perfect game
Mm,
are not that far away from the skills that it takes to play a perfect show. Um, so I think thinking about how people in the theater learn line after line after line of dialogue and perform it every night and make you cry, that's
mm,
a skill.
yeah.
And how can I perform a marimba solo and make somebody cry? How can that happen? Well, you've got to learn how to do those things. So diversification is the absolute key. Um, it also goes in when I talk about diversifying skills. It also goes into uh, people that come out of the University of Iowa are um, ready to take on the world. We make sure that they can read and write and think, and they study rhetoric here, and they study music art, and all of our students here at Iowa do that. And I think my students go out, and I've got people who are playing professionally in Philadelphia, but they work at Steve Weiss. I've got people who are teaching in Tegucigalpa. I've got people who are who are doing website design and playing music.
Mhm.
And obviously teachers and professional players and college professors and all those people. But I think the reason that they get those jobs and the reason that they're marketable is because potential employers look at them and go, well, we need this, but boy, it'd be sure nice to have that.
Mm.
And if you can fill that void, if you know about technology, if you know about ethnomusicology, if you can teach that world music class, then a lot of good things can happen. I think my lights went out. So
That's good. I can still see it.
I'm in a state building, and if I sit still too long, you know, the lights go out, or maybe they're just telling me I need to leave. I don't know.
Energy savers are good.
Maybe.
No, and that's awesome because I mean that you're really speaking to, I mean, this idea right now that we're out of rhythm, and being around during COVID has forced us to be out of rhythm, which
Absolutely.
kind of allows us to reinvent ourselves, reinvent our calendar, reinvent our schedule. And I mean, right at this moment, it's kind of ripe for opportunity. And I've been hearing this kind of throughout a lot of the my networks are, the amount of things we're seeing online right now are incredible, and we've always wondered what is the next step. And so, we've been talking about Facebook and Instagram and things where you can connect potentially with people from all over the world, and you're really starting to see a lot of that now where people are doing these collaborative projects, and some of them are just absolutely incredible. And it comes down to, if you have that diversification, you can do a lot more of that stuff. So that's gold. That's really great advice, and I think people should take that to the bank. That's great.
Yeah. Can you produce a video? Can you make can you run Premiere Pro? Can you uh, do iMovie? Can you figure this stuff out? Um,
Right.
can you make a website?
Yeah.
All of these skills, which are on the surface not related to music making at all.
Hmm.
Can you balance your checkbook? Can you do you understand how investments work?
Right.
All
Right.
of these things are going to help you as you go. I have a recent graduate who graduated during COVID-19, actually, and she majored in English and percussion. She's a percussion major, performance, and in English. And she landed a job right away because everywhere in the world now there are companies, there are corporations in music and any field that you can, Amazon, any big company
Mhm.
needs people to tell their stories.
Yeah.
They
Abs-
need people to do content, to make content for their website, to tell the company's story. And so if in the music world always needs somebody to tell the stories of musicians, of performers, artists, um, organizations,
mhm.
museums. All of those things are out there, and so she's used her degree in English and creative writing and percussion performance to put together a career where she can do all of those things. And now she's playing, still playing out live, and as much as
Wow.
she can now. Um, but she's also able to do other kinds of things. So that's diversification in action right there. So
Wow, that's fantastic. I love it. All right, so you're a seasoned traveler, seasoned performer, seasoned educator. We all kind of hit ruts at different points. How do you recharge your batteries? How does Dr. Daniel Moore stay inspired?
well, it's not fair to probably a lot of people in the world, but I feel like that if I am so lucky to be able to come in here every day when we can all be together and be involved with uh, you know 20 somethings, 18 somethings to 45 somethings of students, um, and to be around their energy and to be their natural abilities and their talent for things and their charm and their ebullient personality, to be around those people, it sort of keeps you sharp,
Mm.
because if you kind of have an off day and you're not really kind of delivering your material very well, a college kid knows it.
Yeah.
And it's like, Dr. Moore, you're not like, right in here right now, you know. And I don't know if other college programs are like this, but my students are free to push back. And
Mm.
actually, they encourage. I mean, they are encouraged to push back because my famous line is, "I always lead with no." If you come in with an idea of a piece you want to play or something you'd like, a project that you'd like to do, my first response is no. And then if you turn with your tail between your legs and then run out of the room crying because Dr. Moore said no, then you weren't, I guess, maybe all that passionate about that idea of yours you had. And so
Mhm.
I think they're used to that now. And I'll say no, and they'll say, yeah, but Dr. Moore, I feel like here are the reasons I think this is going to be a good project. And they
Mhm.
have to verbalize on it. They have to think about, oh, yeah, um, it's going to do this for me, and I'm going to get this out of it, and I'm going to be able to use it for this. And okay, well, I'll come around. I'm changeable. My mind is changeable, and they know this. And I think that is one of the things that helps to make my students more successful is because they do push back.
Mhm.
And so if you're not sharp when they come in, then you're in trouble, right? You know, because they're always pushing you, and they're always challenging you. And so I feel like that, you know, being a college professor, every year I'm challenged with coming up with a cool program.
Mhm.
You know, the last thing I want is my college kids to say, you know, we did this same program 2 years ago. You know,
Right. Right.
it's like we never do anything different. Why be in percussion ensemble? It's the same stuff over and over again.
Mhm.
You know, and it's like there's a challenge there. It's like, okay, well, what can I do to get this group of people this year excited about what we're doing?
Right.
You know, add COVID-19 to that, and
Yeah.
it becomes even more complicated uh,
Right.
and more of a challenge to get people excited and to keep them excited. So that is lots of motivation for me. Is just really trying to keep up with my students. You know, the old adage of "I must hurry to catch the others as I am their leader." Uh,
I love that. I love that. So on that note, I mean, that goes right into the next question. I mean, do you have a book or some quotes or anything like that when you do feel like you're stuck that you would share with us?
well, for me, I mean, you know, I have two that I keep coming back to. One is you know, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for today is its own trouble. And that obviously comes Matthew 6:34 from the Bible, and it's one of those things that has always been powerful for me. And I think the other one was a quote that came to me from my late mother-in-law, who said, who I think my wife and I were both kind of complaining over Thanksgiving dinner about kind of where we were living and how our life was going.
Mhm.
And she just looked at us and she said, you know, you just need to bloom where you're planted.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
And so I think that's great advice. You know, bloom where you're planted. You
Mhm.
know, the flowers don't have a choice of where you plant them. So bloom or die, right? So
Right. Right.
that's their choice. And I probably think about that quote a couple times a
Yeah.
day these days. And I really, it's hard to follow that advice of not worrying about things today. But if you spend all of your time worrying about how things are and how things are going to happen. I was reading a blog by now I'm not going to be able to remember who it was. It may have been Casey or one of the people writing the blogs. I'm not going to remember who it is. But they said that the beginning of the pandemic, they spent a fair amount of time every day kind of looking at the totals, right? Every day we get up and say how many cases of COVID, how many deaths, what states, where's your state, how are we comparing? And I think it took the wind out of a lot of people's sails because we just all kind of shut down and
Mhm.
started watching this, you know. And then at some point, you have to decide, well, I can't just lay here and wait on something to happen. I have to make something happen. And then obviously as a teacher, if you lay down, your students are going to lay down.
Mhm.
And so at some point you kind of have to pull yourself up and say, all right, we're going to think up something cool to do. Let's do this video project together. We all gonna record a part of it.
Right.
And that was a powerful turning point for us. So I think we can get into this thing where all we do is we worry about the troubles of today, and it's like those troubles are going to take care of themselves. Don't worry about it. They're sufficient for today. Tomorrow's another day. So I think for me, that's pretty powerful.
That's gold. I mean, that is incredible because I mean, that's applicable to everyone at every season. And if you just have that in the back of your mind, you can carry on, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I always like kind of ending with this question about, reflection and all of that. So if the current you could give advice to your 20-year-old version of yourself, what would you say?
Oh man, that's super easy, and I think it's probably advice that I could 60-year-old self could probably should learn too. Talk less and listen more. I think if I could go back and tell myself that, I think I would benefit a lot more. I learn a lot more by listening to experts. I learn a lot more by listening to my students. I learn a lot more by listening to people I don't agree with. I just talk less and listen more. I think that's a key thing. And the other thing that I think I would go back and tell my 20-year-old self is to remember to bet on the Cubs to win the 2016 World Series.
There's some Back to the Future action there.
Absolutely, I would totally do that.
I love it. All right, so final question here. I mean, what do you have down the pipe right now? What are some professional or personal projects you've got going on?
Well, Mark, I'm constantly blessed or cursed, however you want to look at it, with ideas. I've never had a shortage of ideas. I've had a shortage of time, a shortage of energy, shortage of strength, a shortage of money, but never ideas. And so I've got so many things kind of in the pipeline. This last semester, I was supposed to be on sabbatical, but the COVID-19 crisis kind of put a damper on all of that stuff. But I sat down and made a list. I have it on my board over there of all the projects that I'm working on and completed and still yet to do. And I have some new solo recordings kind of coming out. I'm working on a recording of you were talking about the hybridization. I have a collection of like folk songs, like folk music from around the world that I have made my own thing, and I hope to do a second solo CD of that music. I have new recordings with the Britmore Duo in the works. Iowa Percussion has a new retrospective recording that's going to be coming out. I'm writing lots of music for Roloff Productions, for myself, for my students here. I'm going to write some more blogs. I'm going to keep kind of going on that, and maybe even write a book about Dick Shorey. So
that's amazing.
There's a lot going down right now. So
that's great. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I mean, you are so humble and you're so kind, and you give me the opportunity to speak with you. And I know we've had a great friendship over the years, but from me to you, you're always an inspiration for me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Oh, well, thank you, Mark. Well, I think you know how I feel about you. I mean, you were, to me, a hero for the work that you do with the American military and spreading the love of rudimental drumming and just music making around the world. So I think the feeling is mutual. So.
Thank you, my friend. So if anyone's interested in finding out more about Dr. Daniel Moore, please look him up on YouTube, his Facebook page, SoundCloud, and please visit his website at www.dan-moore.com. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Greetings again, everyone. We just wanted to take a second to say thank you to Seif Studios for their creative media. If you want to find out more about Seif Studios, look them up on www.seifstudios.com. We'd also like to say thank you to our educational partner, ProLogix Percussion, American-made drum pads. They're doing a special discount code for our listeners today. So if you go to www.prologixpercussion.com and type in TWT20, you will receive 20% off your entire order. So thank you very much for tuning in today, and please check out our supporters.